Wait, hold on one second. I'm sorry, everyone. It seems as though there was some audio errors on the YouTube channel, so I apologize for that. So if you're watching it over the YouTube channel, I'm sorry. You should be able to get what was there out of context. Okay. All right. So now we're going to go back into the Lugensland. We're going to cut all the way down to Beste. Okay. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, now what we're going to do is from the same high guard, or if you want, the shoulder guard. And in Messer, the shoulder guard is literally most of the time sitting on your shoulder. So choose one or the other, up to you. We're going to cut right over how. All right, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, switch your feet so your left foot is forward into the Lugensland. We're going to cut left over how. Und 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And one more for myself. There we go, because I didn't like my last cut. All right, now what we're going to do, left overhow, right under. All right? Und 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Switch your feet. And same thing, but we're going to go right over how, left unter. Und 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, Mittelhau, beginning on the left. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Switch sides. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Alright, let's do some thrusts. Let's begin in the right Aba, and we are going to step forward and thrust into the right Aba, right Stia. Okay? And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, Zehn. Alright, let's go from right Eba, and we're going to thrust, into left Stia. So, into left Stia. Und, eins, zwei, drei, vier, fünf, sechs, sieben, acht, neun, 10. Good, good. Alright, let's switch sides into the left Eba, and we're going to thrust into left Stia. And eins, zwei, drei, vier, fünf, sechs, sieben, acht, neun, 10. Okay, from the left Eba into the right Stia. Und eins, zwei, drei, vier, fünf, sechs, sieben, acht, neun, 10. Okay, now we're going to go, we're going to do the Einschießen, the shooting in. And we're going to do this a couple different ways. What we're going to do is we're going to first begin in Sprechfenster, the long point. And we're going to our first iteration of this, we are going to kind of wind to steer, but we're going to lift our arm so it's even with our shoulder. And the nagel, think of the nagel, which is usually on this side of your hand, is pointing up. Right? So from the long point, we're going to step forward and simply shoot in. Okay? Und eins, zwei, drei, vier, fünf, sechs, sieben, acht, neun, 10. Okay, same thing, but what we're going to do is we're going to, instead of winding our nails down, right, we are going to do the same thing, lifting the messer to shoulder height, but we're going to put the nagel down, right? So our nails should be facing up. And eins, zwei, drei, vier, fünf, sechs, sieben, acht, neun, 10. Okay, now what we're going to do, in the long point, we are simply going to push forward, thrust straight forward, right? As if you're aiming for like this area or the face. So just in, back, und eins, zwei, drei, vier, fünf, sechs, sieben, acht, neun, 10. Sehr gut. Okay, shake it out, grab some water, and we will dive in. Alright, let me just poke on over to the live feed here. Alright, cool. Alright. I believe we are good to go. Alright. Alright, so what I want to kind of do is go back and do a real basic intro to a lot of the terminology we use for Longmesser. And people will probably laugh because whenever I teach longsword, I tend to accidentally use a lot of these terms when I'm trying to describe what we're doing, the postures, all right? And that's all where we'll begin. What we'll do, we'll put my right foot forward first, and I'll just, in the same way as most folks in longsword know this as vom Tag, right? What this is in Longmesser, this is Lugensland. Looking into the land. It's named that for probably a couple of reasons. It's this tall, or the watchtower, looking into the land, or watchtower, right? It's this, high-raised, kind of like, I look like the watchtower of a castle, right? But also, Lugensland, looking into the land, if you look at kind of how my arm is, and my hand is just above my head, I actually can see everything that's going on, right? I can see to my left and to my right. Actually, I can't see my arm at all, right? So, and now the opposite of that, so Lugensland, looking into the land, I am ready, I can see everything. It's a very ready position. It's also a very offensive position, right? This is ready to come down at any time. Now, when it does, right, this is Bastei. The rookery, Bastei is kind of like the armament of a castle area. I forget the exact word I'm looking for right now because my brain is COVID mush. But that, in the German longsword tradition, Alber, right? Now, it can be, I'm the type of person who likes to kind of say that Alber and Schrankut are kind of the same thing, because the idea of Alber is this like low guard that you're using to ward a lower area, or your sword essentially is being described as like a low sword. And so this is Bastei. This is also Bastei. Bastei. Guarding the lower openings. Guarding the upper, you can use this to guard the upper openings, but also attack from, right? Same from these Basteis. You can use different attacks. So again, vom Tag and longsword is actually, in Messer system, is Lugensland. And we bring that down into Bastei, which is Alber in the longsword vocabulary. From here, let's go back up. I'm going to put my left foot forward, and I'm going to bring my sword up into what the German longsword system calls Ox, called Stia. Now, one of the things that I kind of always have been kind of promoting about Stia, or the Stia for Messer, is that we're not trying to create this tiny cone, right? The Messer is not a weapon that's going to help by keeping it in front of your face, right? This is something's going to cut through this, something's going to cut through this. But holding the Messer, kind of bending the elbow a little bit back, so it's a little more comfortable, bent, and then the wrist is rotated up, or at a slight angle. Right? It's a lot more comfortable to sit in. It also allows for better cutting. Also, a lot easier thrusts from this position. Right? So again, Stia. And German longsword is known as Ox. We call it Stia. And you can take that and you can also put it on the left, and you have Stia on the left. Right? A good drill is practicing moving from these two Stias. Yeah. Right? Now, from Stia, we will lower it down. Let me put my right foot back. I'm going to put, and I'm going to put the Messer a little bit down towards my knee, and aim the tip again straight ahead, but slightly up. Basically, the sword is going towards the enemy. This is Ebe. Okay, this is also in the longsword tradition known as Flug, right? And we can take it just as easily to the other side. Right, another good drill. Just practicing this. Right? The footwork that we talk about in Messer is generally the same. You have you're usually holding yourself in a guard. Oh, sorry. Before I get to footwork, let me get finish the guard talk. Sorry, getting ahead. I'm so excited. I'm actually excited. I'm getting ahead of myself. So in addition to to those normal guards, right? We have again Lukenslan, Beste, Stia, Eba, right? In addition to kind of those are the 4 canonical kind of long sword standard Vierlega, but kind of translated to the Messer side. We also have different heights. I kind of like translating this initial kind of cutting to the skull height as Einhorn, because it is very much mythical animal, using animals to describe the guards. It's also very offensive. I also kind of consider this right down the middle height with the back edge also to kind of be Einhorn, like this height. I don't really consider it a guard, but I kind of long, Einhorn. And then as we always talk about long point, right? There's always a lot of question of like Sprechfenster, the speaking window, like the difference between Sprechfenster and long point. I would say that like one is the application of the other. Sprechfenster is often talked about as the thing you do while you're like it's the position you hold while you're waiting for the other person. I think like long point is kind of more of the action, right? The more offensive action, right? So if you're sitting in Sprechfenster, you're more of waiting for what this it's the application of it, right? You are in the waiting, trying to wait and see what the other person does, right? While like I think long point is more of the offensive version. I know that's a little like higher, or that's kind of like a little higher order like thinking, but I mostly call this Sprechfenster because I like to kind of refer to it as like the Sprechfenster guard. And then Bastei is just another easy way to describe the sword being low. So Einhorn, Sprechfenster, Bastei. We have a few iterations, especially in the Paurnfeindt version of Messer. He has another version of Sprechfenster that is this, where you take so if you take your normal grip, and you take and the nagel, let's say, is pointing to your right side as it normally does. You put your thumb on the back of the blade, and you bring it to your chest. So this is another version. Is like another iteration that Paurnfeindt has for Sprechfenster. I'll see if I can find the page real quick. We'll do the plays from this. And another version of Bastei that he specifically has, where instead of being in the middle, you specifically are holding your Messer over your left foot with the nagel. So your Messer's as such. In this case, my thumb is pointing down, but the nagel is on the left and is pointing right at my foot. Right? And it's like hovering right above the foot. And so these are and then also this same guard is sometimes just kind of translated back a little bit. You see this a lot in Talhofer. He likes to put the sword here. We like to kind of call this in scabbards because this, for the most part, is kind of the side, the space where the sword would be coming out of some type of scabbard or chafe. Not from the chafe, but scabbard, or be it wood or leather. So you'd have, so it's kind of Nebenhut. We call this a lot in longsword, but it's really like from the scabbard's position. And we will be doing that. We'll be getting into that in another unit because there's a lot of fun stuff you can do from here. So again, let's review real quick. Let's begin. So we're going to go. So we're in Lugensland, also known as Vomtag, longsword. Bring that down to its opposite of Bastei, which is Alber in longsword. Back up, Stia, which is ox in longsword, or something similar. And then we bring it down to Eba on the right, Eba on the left. That's like Flug in longsword. And then from here, we also have, and then we have Sprechfenster, which is down the middle and out. Or we also have Sprechfenster here. Now, one of the things that Corey Winslow was telling me about, like, this is actually a really good Sprechfenster because you are weighing in weight, but also you're not offering your hand as a target. It's a more of a kind of come get me kind of Sparkfenster. Because what's nice from here, it's very easy to just thrust, right? Yeah, and it's also easy if you move out to cut to Stia. And if you notice that, it's like a really easy snapping action. And you can do a lot of damage with that. And same thing, you can also thrust high to a Stia if you need to, which is also a lot of fun, right? Yeah. So that is kind of like, so those are the basics. And again, so those are the basic postures. And the heights that we kind of frequently talk about are, again, Einhorn, this kind of skull kind of height. The long point height, which is kind of aiming for this area. And then Bastet, reusing the term for kind of like the low targets, right? I'll have some diagrams and some stuff up, some resources online for folks too. So yeah, and then the hues themselves, the cuts themselves, are basically the same as we did during the warm-up cuts. It's why we do the warm-up cuts the way we do, because beginning in the Lugensland, right, this is probably the simplest cut we could teach, right? It is the most peasant strike one can do. And so what we're doing with our warm-up cuts is, even though we're cutting high, cutting mid, cutting low, we're kind of cycling through the beginning. We're kind of cycling through all of the different basic cuts, right? It's almost as if you're taking an entire class in the warm-ups, because then we move on to cutting Oberhaus, add that Unterhau back in, which can be, I know especially from this side, really not fun from Messer, and then Mittelhau. That terminology is all the same in Messer, and the thrusts are basically the same, or the stabs are basically the same thing. A lot of how I like to interpret, and the way I kind of like to talk about both the cuts and the thrusts, is that we're moving from, say, like I talk about during our warm-up thrusts, we're moving from Eber to Stier, or we're taking the Eber and shooting in, or we're in Stier and we're shooting in the long point, right? Yeah, so that's kind of like all the basic actions, right? And the slice is the same and all that kind of thing. Though I think it being a machete, basically a big machete, kind of makes slicing a little easier and hewing a little easier than, say, thrusting with these. But I still think all the mechanics still work. And the footwork is all the same, right? You have your gathering step, which, say, you have your right foot forward and your left foot back. I always like to keep my knees bent a little bit, most of the weight on the front of my foot, so it's a little easier to move back and forth. 70% of my weight's forward, 30% back. Try to keep everything straight, as loose as you can. It's one of those weird things where, even though you're fighting someone, the more tense you are, the slower you're going to move. So the more you can kind of zone out, like the faster you're going to be able to respond to things. Tim Kaufman taught me that initially, and that changed the way I fenced forever. So the footwork is basically the same. You have your gathering steps, in which your dominant foot is always kind of a front, or whatever direction that you're moving. That foot that's already forward or backwards is moving first, and the other one's coming to catch it. So in this case, I know the folks on the Discord probably can't see my foot too well, but you have passing and gathering, and then passing steps is the opposite. It's basically normal walking, where your feet are moving back and forth. And I think Messer also allows for a little bit more of natural movement. There are some folks that believe with Messer, and I don't fully subscribe to this, but when you're moving with Messer, you want to move with your guard. So that way you have your sword is kind of moving around. I don't like doing that because I think it opens. I think it gives too much of an opening. Say in this case, if you know that my sword is going to be moving left to right, you're going to try to take an index moment there. So I try to generally keep the sword in one place or put it somewhere, and I know where my openings are. All right. So that's like the basics. That's super, super basic stuff. Next week, we're going to be kind of doing a mix of longsword and Messer again, but we're going to be doing a lot of footwork stuff. next Friday. So we'll go into all this in more depth then, and hopefully I'll have fixed the Discord so that you can see everything. All right. So, and does anyone on? So I'm going to turn to the Discord real quick. Does anyone have any questions about anything I've talked about? Have I gone over too much and need to review something? Go over something again because I do that. All right. Cool. So what I want to do now is talk a little bit about the Paurnfeindt material, one of the Paurnfeindt bits. And kind of how I've been interpreting this stuff, because I think it is interesting how it's been done. So give me 1 second. I'm just going to throw up a title card for the folks on the YouTube, and but I will read for you all here. So what I'm going to be reading is, so if you have this book, I'm on page 72. And it says, the first piece, stand with your left side against him so that your hilt stands at your right knee and the point opposes him. If he then strikes from Vomtag, go into the triangle or false step, displace short, and strike long after. Now that's a lot of words. And one thing I've been finding about Paurnfeindt is that there's a lot of start here, do this, or this, or this. And at first I thought it was really confusing because earlier translations sounded like there was... how do I put it? Like there was always kind of like this long string of things happening, and we're like, oh, is this like a kata, or is this kind of like a really, really specific instance? And what we're finding is that it's actually trying to tell you, hey, if from this guard, these are kind of the things you should be doing from this position, which is interesting. And again, just so we have context for like what the image looks like, I actually on the YouTube, you should have an image of it full screen, but for folks on the Discord, so they're asking you to stand like this. I think the stance is a little exaggerated, but I do love the color in this book. The image is, and the wardrobes are pretty great. I'm always a sucker for fashion. So, what we're going to do, so let's take a look at what this means, right? Is asking you to put your left side forward, so your left foot is forward, and your messer, so your hilt is down by your right knee. Now, what it's just not doing, it's not describing what guard you're in, right? We're in Aber, right? We're in Aber on the right. And in this case, we are facing our opponent, and we're waiting for them to strike Oberhau. So let's bring in... Oh, God. The yet unnamed stand. And it's going to be striking Oberhau, right? I'm going to lower this a little bit so we're going to catch it. So it'll be a little exaggerated in how far that Oberhau has kind of come down. All right? So, what they're asking you to do, in my opinion, is I actually think it's a couple different things that can be interpreted here. Because it's saying the triangle step or the false step. Now, people, a lot of folks that I've been talking with you is asking, like, oh, isn't this the same thing? I don't think so, and I'll show you why in just a second. So what I think they're doing, so this is coming in, and this person thinks they're going to strike me in the head. Now, the good news is, as a fencer, I'm going to wait until I want to make sure I have first distance, right? I want to make sure that if they are going to come strike me, that I'm giving them an opening, which is I'm giving them my left side, but also I want to make sure that they are the ones who have to take that action, right? Now, I think part of I think in general, the core of what they're asking you to do is, so let me get myself in the way of the cut, stepping offline in a way that makes it so that this cut would, if it was to strike me, it would miss me by just a little bit, right? And so I think what they're asking you to do is go from here, and then they want you to do one of two things. They either want you to step just out of the way, offline and in, and strike, to kind of striking around to the side of the head. So from here, you're moving in, and for those who can see my feet, it is kind of this, this kind of triangle step to finish, right? And you want to, and this is one. It's kind of like the, kind of many ways, the Nachreisen, the moving after. So you are in Aber and simply striking to their head while they miss you, right? Now the other thing, which more connects it, in my opinion, to the Glasgow, is that you're beginning in this Aber, and I think you can then go to Stia, right? You can stab them with Stia. And part of this, and part of the reason I think this is also valid is because this is also very, and part of also the reason why I don't always think that it's good to say go to the left Stia, is because left Stia, even though it seems more correct, if you are moving to your right, you don't want to go into the left Stia in this case, because if they turn, they're going to be they're going to have control over the weak of your sword, right? What's nice is that if you go into the right Stia and are attempting to stab them in the face by you moving right, and let's say they miss, all you have to do is drop your tip, and you're going to catch them on the strong of your sword, and then you're doing, you're doing this kind of stab, and then you can do other work, right? We talk about this when we go over the Glasgow, how you're here, and you stab, and you can come around. Yeah. And this I'll get into it a little more when we talk about the second bit. But so that made me think that maybe, again, they're not necessarily prescribing specific plays, but I think what Paurnfeindt's doing is if you are in this position, your options, you can kind of move around and cut, or you can move around, or you can say thrust, you can attack, because it doesn't say cut, it says strike. So that it makes it more generalized, right? So we have to think about what does that mean. And also, and again, also from here, if you stab and you still need the parry, it's very, very, you still get to catch them on a spot of the sword where you have more control. And especially because, so I'm wondering if the false step and the triangle step just mean you're moving left or right. Because if you've noticed, especially in terms of like cuts or actions, the German school is like oddly pedantic. Like they will name you do an action, and if you do it, but if you do like a schnappen from your left side, it's a Wecker or it's Zwinger, and if you do it from the left side, it's called something else. But it also depends on which way you're stepping. Like the action of the hand and foot are kind of seen as this one thing. So it gets kind of pedantic. So it made me think that maybe the false step. I'm wondering if they're asking you to go from here, if a false step is maybe that moving left and stabbing in. I think that's a lot. Like I don't necessarily like the idea of an Oberhau coming in and trying to cross it, but you are using the nail side of the sword, right? It is kind of an Absetz in action. And as long as you're out of the way, you're fine. But the bigger question, and same thing, you can still hang around it. And part of the reason that I think it is, and actually I'd be interested in like talking with people who are familiar with like some of the Kuchner stuff to kind of see if any of this kind of plays in with how some of that material is as well. But again, I think, so for the first part is about Aber and being in this Aber position and then striking in and getting yourself out of the way of the incoming Oberhau and striking in, right? And again, why I'm a huge advocate of thrusting in like this is you can do other work that puts a bar of steel between you and the other person as you move around them. And if you're going to move left, it's the inverted hand, right? It's like the Talhofer inverted hand. It's just you're stepping way, way offline. So you can begin in Aber. I'm going to raise myself up a little bit so folks on the Discord can see. Beginning in Aber, and if that's coming in, you can kind of thrust in thrust in that way, and if you need to hang, you can hang. Now, part of the reason I think this is true, because the next part, it says from the same position, and you see this a lot in Glasgow as well. From the same stand, over and over and over again. It's asking, what the next part is like a laming piece, and it's kind of describing the spirit of laming. And what it wants you to do is, if someone's throwing an Oberhau, it wants you to cut them on the wrist, on the inside. So in this case, this person is, say, right-handed, so this is the outside, this is the inside. It wants you to wound them from below. So if that person's coming in, it's stepping offline and cutting the Stia from Aber. Right? From Aber to Stia. But instead of going for the face, you're going for the hand. Right? And we're used to this. Anyone who takes my class knows that I think laming is like the #1 thing we should learn always. We can do the same thing from above, just simply by stepping out of the way and pushing down on their hands. Right? So from Aber, we step out and just cut forward. They're not going to try to reach out and grab it, because if you cut forward with the sharp part, that's going to be bad. So there's two different ways, things you can do from this Aber for laming. You can cut right in, or you can go to Stia and get under their arm. Right? And once you're under their arm, let's pretend that this is an arm. There we go. Once you get under, you can also push back with the arm, push up and back with, right? And that will really do them dirty. Right? So those are the first two Paurnfeindt pieces. So again, he wants you in this Aber position. I'll just do it this way so you can see it maybe a little better. So they want you in Aber, and then to put yourself in the triangle or false step, taking yourself offline and then attacking the person. And so you can really do that again. You can do that as a cut, or you can do that as a thrust, or you can do it as a thrust with the inverted hand. Right? So it's about going to Stia. So basically prescribing, you can go to Stia on the left or right, or you can just cut right in. Right? And additionally, with this similar action, you can go right into the wrists to lame them. Right? All right. Let me find the next piece. Nope. That's a next week thing. So again, actually, let me back up because I want to do this one. All right. So the next one is, I want to talk a little bit about kind of the. I like to refer to it as Strecken. Right. So Paurnfeindt has you begin here as the base model, basically with the left in Bastei, or the kind of like, imagine taking Nebenhut or the scabbards and kind of projecting it out in front of you. Right. The Glasgow prescribes that you can do it from the middle hut. But just because we're doing Paurnfeindt, we'll do it his way, and we'll start here. And what he's talking about is, let me just lower this down. This thing's awesome. I love it. Right? He's basically saying, if a cut is coming in, what you're going to do is you're going to take it. You're going to use the back of your messer to intercept it, and then you're going to attack them either by, I believe, I want to make sure I get the order correct, so forgive me. All right, so you want to take it away with the back of your messer, right? And then so you either want to shoot in, right? So he's asking you to go from here, ward and shoot in. Right? Or he's saying just shoot in. I still think that you need this kind of slap, especially if someone, as a small fencer, if someone's larger than you, you want to make sure that you ward. I'm not really into I'm not really into the don't ever parry thing. I don't think that's a good idea. That's not a good way to stay alive. So you want to make sure that you've parried that strike. And then what you can do, if this was a person's arm, not a mechanical thing, you're hoping that this strike will deflect that messer away, and you can bring the messer around your head and cut. So you're here. Up, in. Yeah, and one thing when you practice this, you want to make sure that you get a continuous action of, and it's out. It's really kind of hard for me to hear. Without the physical feedback, you want to make sure not to pull it. Because one thing, and this is something I learned through failure, if you pull it, you're not going to quite knock it away as easy. Yeah. Let me see if I can loosen this up a little bit without it kind of completely going in. Completely going down. All right. So you want to make sure that when you knock it away, it's out and then in, because you want to get that clear. Right? And you want to also practice back, out, and all the way down. Don't imagine a target's there. I just want it out, down. Full extension, all the way. Tip at when you end. Tip at knee. Here, clear, down. Yeah, there we go. Right? And again, same thing. If you're here, right? Now, unlike the Glasgow materials I primarily teach, he doesn't really get into a whole lot of the wrestling. There's only a couple pieces for that. But how, you can always use your offhand once you've done this deflection, moving in, right? But yeah, so those are the first parts, the Paurnfeindt parts. Again, so real quick as a review, and then I'll kind of, what time is it? Okay, I got 5 minutes, so I'll power through it. So as a review, the first thing that Paurnfeindt teaches us is Aber. He wants us to stand in Aber on the right-hand side. Right? So and then we're going to be doing this against an Oberhau coming in. And so we're here, and basically what we want to do is step in such a way that we are coming offline, so that if I was doing this here, if I don't move, I die. Right? But if I move out of the way, I just need to move just enough out of the way so this misses me. Yeah, right? What I'm going to then do is just cut to the face and get out of the way. Right? Bam. Right? Or stab to the face. Or if I'm unlucky, it's stab, but they've seen me move, and now it has to turn into something else, right? But it turns into a roof guard, right? But now, at the very least, I can do something else. So you're beginning in Aber, and you're just getting out of the way of the cut, and you're getting out of the way of the attack, and taking that time, and then cutting right in, right? Or what you're doing is you're intercepting it in such a way that as it's coming down, you're cutting Stia to the wrist. And if you want to get real ugly, you can move in with. Alright? So from Stia, Aber to Stia to intercept. And I think you could probably do it the opposite way too. It's a little risky because you're kind of crossing under a sword. but it's still possible, right? So again, two good options. I also personally like adding the fact that you can still use that cut straight in, and instead of cutting to the head, just cut right to the wrist. I think that's a Paul's call thing. All right. And then, of course, the Strecken. Get it a little further on. Put your left foot forward. Messer, instead of the Neben or Mittelhut, put it right over our foot. And knock it out of the way. Cutting it. Right? And this is one of those instances where it is actually okay to let the tip move out of the way, like kind of offline a little bit, because you're clearing, and then in. You know, and normally you want to make sure you practice getting that full whip. So when you do the sword, you still get enough energy to clear it, and because you're not going to end up back here, and you still can take that energy and thrust it forward into their face. Right? Same thing. You can either and thrust, or boom and cut. And once you're here, you can also slice your way out. Yeah, so those are the three basic Paurnfeindt bits, and they really, really, they jive with a lot of what we talk about with the Glasgow. The Glasgow stuff, what we try to particularly study in Collective des Messerfechtens is the idea that not specific plays, but we're always asking ourselves, what are the plays asking us to do? How are we holding our bodies? How is our enemy holding their body, or our opponent? I shouldn't say enemy because we're fencing friends, right? How is our opponent holding their body? Where are they in space? Where are they in their action? And if I'm holding my body in this way, how do I respond, right? And so, again, like I said, next week I really want to kind of focus on footwork stuff, but I also want to start talking a little bit about kind of digging into our interpretation of the Glasgow actions, and then we will kind of get into I want to do a whole unit on laming, because there's some really, really great drills we can be doing for a home solo practice for laming stuff, and I am very excited to do them because like I said, it's a silly thing, but it's one of my favorite things to do. I guess, and so that's kind of everything I have for class. Does anyone have any questions? Katie.
Is there any way to show the first Paurnfeindt from Hema to Stia, like the thrust in?
Yeah, sure.
Because I'm having trouble seeing the relationship between your blade and the other person.
Sure. So I'll put this right in front. Right? So let's say this is the line of attack. Does that look okay? So if this is the line of attack, and it's going right for my skull, what I'm doing is this. I'm just stepping off line enough. And really, if I want to do it correctly, I should be moving my left shoulder back so I get just a little bit more extension here on the Stia Thrust. You can see I'm coming just offline, and I either have to kind of like lean on the right leg a little bit, not too much that I fall into it, or if you come from like a classical fencing or like a rapier background, you can throw that shoulder back, just to kind of clear this line. But you're still, I see how we can hear, and I'm stepping off.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Yep. And this, oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's really committed, right? Like, that's not going to work after this.
Well, I think what happened, yeah, I mean, if you have someone who's kind of, I mean, it definitely is about someone who's coming in for an attack, right? And like, if they're going to Oberhau that close, what is nice, again, about the Stia moving offline, if they're trying to fake you out, you just drop the tip. you thrust, and you can just drop the tip. But also, again, if you're thrusting, when you do this thrust, a lot of times what will happen is the person is just going to do something like this, to which case you can come around and do something else. Or if you're coming to thrust, you can want, depending on where you land on the sword, you can do that. Or really, if you're going into thrust and they're moving to parry, all you have to do is drop your tip, right? Because especially if I know I'm safe over here and they're cutting, right? Hold on, let me see if I can get a little more arc on this, right? If I know they're cutting, right? This is their cutting angle. And I go to thrust, this is going to elicit more of a response to this, like probably an over parry to some degree, unless we're talking about, I don't know. I don't want to say sport fencing, but like sport Hema-ing. But like this is going to elicit response that's probably going to be to try to parry that out of the way. And it's a lot easier for me to, as this is coming in, to just do this. Change through. But yeah, I think you are right in like the initial interpretation of this kind of coming in and cutting over is that there is or cutting even if it's thrust or the cut, there's an element of this person is committed, right? And we also talk a lot about like the time of the hand versus the time of the foot. This person, if I've fenced smartly, I put myself in first distance and I've set this person up to fail, right? Especially because it's talking about, all right, come get my left side. It's right here. Just come take it. Okay, no. And I'm removing it because they have to step in order to reach me, and then they're just giving me the prize. All right. Anyone else? Okay. Cool. Awesome. Josh.
Yeah. So for these purposes, are you considering the overhaul either to be straight down, or are you considering it to be an angle, and then does that affect your choice of which way?
I think that in terms of, that's actually a really good question. I am interpreting this to be just a straight Oberhau, right? Or an Oberhau that is coming from that person's dominant side, right? Because if it's a angle, it's really hard to do an angle cut. But like if you're able to do, if you imagine this cutting this way, it's actually Stier works a little better because you get again it becomes like an Absetzen type situation. But also, you can still just cut in by moving to the side because you've still beaten them, right? It kind of becomes a Zornhau-ish kind of situation, like the Corey Winslow Zornhau at that point. But also, but again, this is all dependent on timing and distance, right? And this is why I actually prefer the Glasgow stuff because it has more, I think, more breathing room for a lot of this thing, where if they're doing it here because they're trying to set up a thrust and I'm trying to cut in, now we're on the bind, and with Messers, on the bind sucks because there's like, we're fighting with machetes and you're going to probably start wrestling. Speaking as a small fighter, that sucks. But if you are here and they're cutting in to try to set up for like a thrust or because they want to encourage you to grapple, that's when I'm going to start trying to do like thrust. I'm going to start trying to use some Stia, more work in Stia, right? Or more laming stuff. And this is stuff we can also play with once once we can kind of get people in the same space. But I think that really what I think he's trying to teach here is that you can take advantage of this space. But again, that's why I teach the Glasgow stuff primarily, because I think in this case what they're teaching in Glasgow, you're moving from Aber to Stia, and then you can bow around it if you need to. Right? And I think using certain versions of Stia allow you to, especially in this case, like you're talking about, you don't quite know where that Oberhau is coming in from. You can turn, and instead of protruding forward into Stia, you can quickly, you're going to thrust, but you can quickly turn that into a roof guard if you need to. to do something. Does that answer the question? Does that answer, or is that a useful answer, I should say?
Yeah, part of why I was asking is because in pure voiding, I found that going to doing underneath the opponent's blade helps me void more rather than going in the same direction that their blade's gone to.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes harder to void.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I mean, you're also parrying, so I wasn't sure if that idea came into play. Like, would you want to go to your left here if their blade is going to go right?
Right, and I think a typical Absetzen is going to involve that kind of footwork, where you are going to go towards the blade. I think, again, it kind of depends on what you're trying to do. And I think that's what makes the Messer kind of interesting, is that you can use it as a thrusty weapon, like in a traditional longsword way. Like, part of the reason we do a lot of that moving, okay, move to the left, and now thrust in that ox from this right against this right Oberhau, is because we're using longer weapons that we're trying to set up the thrust, right? These swords don't have it's a big machete. It doesn't really have as much leverage. It's got different leverage, I should say, or different form of leverage. And so I think that KDF still works, but I think that we have to think about, in my opinion, I think we have to think about it more like machete fencing than we would need to, maybe think about it as like longsword fencing. But again, I think that, like a lot of like what we talk about with our standard system is about just moving, mostly using the forehand ward, right? Forehand and roof ward, because those things can easily become offensive bits. But that's just my interpretation. I don't want to go too deep down a rabbit hole. But those are just kind of like so that's kind of just a real basic interpretation of the Paurnfeindt stuff. I'm still working on refining it. I'm not saying it's the right whatever. It's just kind of where I'm at with my current study with it. Next week we'll kind of start again. We're going to dive into footwork stuff, but also really get into breaking down the Messer system, in a more thorough way of that we normally teach our classes. I just thought it would be fun to dive into this book because it's a pretty book, and I've just been reading it. And it's been on my mind. Yeah. So last call for questions. No. All right. Cool. Well, let's salute out, and then we'll call it. All right. All right. Achtung. Grüße. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And just in terms of for the folks on the Discord, let me know how this worked. I know like the camera angle wasn't exactly great, but I'll work on making it the old wide lens where you can see my entire apartment, and at least all the actions I'm doing. Like if this kind of feedback, if this kind of like one-on-one or this more kind of open meetup version works. Again, I'm trying to find a way that I can both record it and so we can air it on YouTube, because a lot of students have found that super helpful. But also, it's good to see everybody, but also it's easier to do Q&A and feedback stuff here. So let me know what you think. And yeah, thanks for joining me. And just as a heads up, I know it's still like a half a month away, but I'm going to warn everyone now, January 1st is going to be 1,000 cuts. It's a good way to start the new year. It's a delightful, painful way to, life is pain way to start the new year. And we also have some exciting announcements coming down the line, so please tune in for that. Until then, classes are still going to be running on Tuesday and Fridays. I believe Katie is going to be taking on next Tuesday. So, Katie, not to put you on the spot, but do you have anything you want to say about your Tuesday class?
Doing games. I'm prepared to.
All right, I'm both excited and horrified now. So Katie will be running our Tuesday class. This is going to be something that we're going to be doing a lot. We're going to be having a lot of folks come in on Tuesdays, our journeyman teachers, and kind of giving different, giving us insights and their perspectives on Hema and various Hema adjacent topics. So I'm excited for this. And then on Friday we'll be returning to Longest Messer, Longsword, mostly Messer because it's my favorite thing, classes. And so I hope you all will join me. All right. Movie night is coming up, and I'll let you all go now. All right. Good night, everybody.